afternoon. Here we are at the very last session, the sixth section of our European Energy Efficiency Day. Over the last morning and afternoon, we have been talking about the different aspects of energy efficiency and how it can help solving not only the energy crisis, but also to face, to help, to give a contribution to the solution of the climate crisis, and also to develop our economic activity. In this session, we touch another extremely important element of energy efficiency, the energy efficiency potential, notably in buildings, and this is the health and well-being of all of us. And this is a very important element of the energy efficiency agenda, because as you know, and as we all know, in order for the transition to be functioning and to be attractive, we have to make sure that everybody finds its own merit and also find an improvement of his or her own situation. And certainly the quality of buildings and the quality of indoor air and all sorts of elements that makes our health and well-being are sometimes forgotten, but absolutely key and crucial area, which over the last years have been developing quite well. Some years ago, when we discussed about energy efficiency, notably in building, but not only, this element was probably not that prominent. And even today, during the energy crisis, we're mostly speaking about saving energy or saving gas. But certainly, if you're speaking about a game changer, as we would like energy efficiency to be, the question of health and well-being is absolutely key in order to bring citizens with us and also to convince that change is not only possible, but also absolutely advisable. With me in this panel, we have very expert and also quite passionate interlocutors. And I think that in this agenda, being passionate is absolutely crucial in order to be able to convince, because we're not yet able to convince the majority of people, and above all, the majority of decision makers, that this is the direction to go. So without further ado, I would like to start this session with a kickoff question to all of our speakers, to which I ask them to answer quite briefly, and this is: how can we rethink of the European built environment to create healthy and sustainable building? This is really just a sort of very little hors d'oeuvre to what we're going to listen later, but just to give us the sense. Ruth, can you start, please? Ruth Reichstein is advisor on Green Deal and New European Bauhaus idea in the European Commission. And I must say that this issue of Bauhaus was a great integration of all the difficult things that we have to do in order to improve the renovation rate of our buildings. Ruth.
Thank you very much, Monica. An honor to open this panel and this first round. Well, I will keep it brief. As you said, I'm mainly coordinating the European Bauhaus initiative here for the president. And I think, and I would even think that is also true for the broader discussion on energy efficiency in buildings. I think really that this more integrated approach that we try to have with the European Bauhaus, which is not only sustainable, but also looking at the social dimension, so to make things affordable and accessible, but also, and this is probably the most controversial and also new part, beautiful, is really essential to bring it really to the people. Because I mean, we all at the moment obviously would love to live in a very energy efficient house because it would help to bring our energy bills down. But I think we also want to live in a house or an apartment where we feel well, and this is something that is crucial for us, that we think that people who feel well where they live are more respectful for the living environment around them, are also more ready to change their own habits and to contribute to the transition. So I think this more holistic approach would be for me one very important point and answer to your question.
Thank you, Ruth. And we move now to Madame Iskra Michalhova. Sorry for not pronouncing well your name. Is a member of the European Parliament, and she is also the Vice President of the Renew Group. So, Madame, for you, the same question.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this question, which deserves a real long answer, but I'll try to be brief and to say that the more healthy and well-being buildings, it's mean energy efficient building, which are constructed with energy efficient and modern materials, and which are maintained in a modern, technological, innovative, and digital way. This is what we cannot say to the normal human person in Europe, but the idea is that well-being and healthy buildings is meant to put together new technologies, new approach, and new understanding of responsibilities of all who are involved in construction, maintaining, and use of the buildings.
Thank you very much, also because you managed in such a short time to put together all the elements, of what we need in order to make not only a beautiful, but also a healthy house. So I think that you will come back to all the elements that you mentioned later. And also these were also the key points that were done in the previous day, in the previous session. So I'm very happy that there is some kind of unity and of coherence in such a short message. Thank you so much. And I'd like now to turn to Professor Atze Burstra from TU Delft, who is a professor of building services innovation.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks again for the invitation. Yeah, I think Ms. Reichstein already used the word integral. When I talk to my students in Delft about the challenges of the future, I always remind them that when we first starting looking at our buildings in Europe in a systematic way around 1900, because we had all kinds of public health problems, think cholera, for example, we were not talking about energy. We were only talking about health and comfort, about a minimum amount of daylight, about ventilation, about avoiding mold, about creating healthy indoor environments. And this is a very big human driver. Of course, we've been spoiled the last couple of decades with very cheap and abundantly available energy. So we kind of have to rethink what we do on the energy side. But it's essential that we look at, well, the prime needs of the Europeans and also outside Europe in terms of health and comfort when it's about their dwellings, but also their schools, their offices, etc. And of course, we should do it in a sustainable way with as little energy use and CO2 emissions as possible. But I think it should be health and comfort at the core. And of course, there's a very important objective on the energy performance side too.
Yes, indeed. And also we saw this very much in the pandemic, that this element became really, really very, very at the core of the interest of our citizens.
Yes.
And I would like now to give the floor to Marisa Matias, who is a member of the European Parliament. And she is from the European United Left, Nordic Green Left. I'm very happy to see her here after so much time not seeing her. And she also is a shadow rapporteur on the EPBD. So she is really in the heart of the fight for the moment. So Marisa, the same question for you.
Thank you, Monica, and really nice to see you again and see you all. I think this is a very important topic. As you said, I'm following on behalf of the left group the revision of the energy performance of the energy performance of the buildings directive, and it's quite important key tool. But I think you just said one important issue, because we know, according to the World Health Organization, that we spend like 90% of our time indoors. So it's quite important that we treat as well the outdoors as we treat the indoors, and in terms of energy efficiency and well-being and health, quality of life, it's quite important, this dimension. Also because it's estimated that more than 100,000 people in Europe die every year in a premature way because of the lack of an healthy environment, indoor environment. So this is a dimension that we are working in the revision of the directive, which I think is one of the most important, to be honest, because normally we just think about the outdoors and also the efficiency aspects, but we're not taking into account the health and well-being. And if the pandemic situation and confinement show us something, was that I think that people now give more and more importance to homes with good indoor environment quality, and I think that's something that we can never ever forget, and especially after the pandemic crisis, it becomes a key element for everyone's lives.
Thank you very much. And I would like to give the floor, last but not least, to Julie Kjerstrup, who joined Velux Group and who is also a long-standing friend and member of the European Alliance to Save Energy.
Indeed, thank you, Monica. And for those of you who might not know Velux, our name is short. V comes from ventilation and lux comes from light. So that pretty much describes what we do. We sell fresh air and daylight in the shape of skylights and roof windows. So it's always difficult to be last because many of my points have already been made. But I think the one about the 90% is really just worth thinking about, right? If we spent 90% of our time indoors, and that needs to be in a space that is well-performing, that's healthy and comfortable. And by the way, this is at home, but also at work. And that is just not what we see today. And I think the issues tied to that, I mean, we're talking about sort of well-being, we're talking about health, but it's also its productivity. For instance, we know that kids perform better in schools that are well aerated. We know that people produce better work in offices that are well equipped. So there is, I mean, beyond sort of the wanting to feel nice and comfortable, there is also a very clear sort of health and a sort of societal economic tag attached to this. And then I think talking about what is it then we want, well, what we want, and again it was said by some of the other speakers, is a framework that's way more holistic, where we think sort of this sort of notion of energy and well-being and the associated costs, both to societal, economic, into that framework. And very concretely, when we look at what's on the table at the moment, we would like to see in EPBD both some overall measures around the minimum energy performance standards to create direction, but also we don't actually have a definition at EU level of what a healthy indoor climate is. And that's of course a starting point, because we don't agree on what that is, then we also can't build that into regulation. So that's really sort of one of the important legislative starting points from our perspective. And there are some standards, and there is some WHO work on this as well that we can start from. But really agreeing on what this is and how to measure that, I think is a fundamental starting point for taking this more seriously in legislative terms as well.
Thank you very much, Julie. And indeed, this is a key point, because the fact that you have or you don't have data is something that is quite important, because let's face it, EPBD and in general, the renovation wave, the Bauhaus initiative, all of this is not easy. And we see very much, and certainly Marisa and Madame Mikhailova see well in their work in the Parliament that this is not something that is going to become, you know, a very easy agreement with member states, and we actually are very much risking to lose some of the most important elements of the Commission proposal, let aside the improvement that we could do. And therefore, the fact of having data is absolutely important in order to be able to convince actually policymakers that this is not only that difficult, but it is really necessary. And in this respect, maybe Professor Böstra, can you give us an overview of the state of play regarding indoor environmental quality in the building stocks that you have been working on?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I should mention is that, of course, the European Parliament made a very wise, or the Commission made a very wise decision when they started working on the EPBD packages, also the last round, the recast round, because I'm saying this partly as co-author of the standard involved, but that of course it was said that we should make sure that whatever we do on the energy side, the measures we take, they should not harm on the comfort and health side. So the decision was made, and SEN actually was asked to develop a standard specifically about indoor environments. You can see this as a safety net, and a standard that describes at the class A, B, C level, or category 1, 2, 3, I should say, like minimum values in terms of ventilation, maximum values in terms of installation noise, requirements in relation to maximum temperature in buildings. So it kind of helps designers or people who maybe renovate buildings to not forget about those aspects, indoor environmental aspects that actually have direct impact on people's health and comfort. And so the standard is called the EN 16798.1. I'm not here to promote the standard, but I do see that sometimes people forget that we do have this standard that describes very clearly for all the important environmental quality aspects what should be kept in mind when, for example, redesigning existing buildings. And of course, each country themselves can decide which of the 3 levels they take as a reference. And even if you do in real life a project, when we do that with architects here in the Netherlands, you even can decide for a specific project to go for the highest class and then category, and for other projects, maybe for a lower one when it's a renovated building, historical building, for example. Yeah, maybe that's enough for now. I mean, I can say a lot more. I've been working in the indoor environmental quality area for more than 30 years. I can say a lot about, there's a lot of research. So we know a lot about how people interact with their buildings, what causes people to be hot or not to be hot, what triggers them to buy an air conditioner or not. I mean, there's a lot of research we should all look into when making further decisions, also just energy related, I think.
Thank you very much, Marisa. On the issue of the conversation and the discussion in the Parliament, do all these elements resonate in the conversation? The issue of health, the issue of quality. You know, how is your work in the Parliament on the EPBD reflect this kind of worry, or is it something that is completely out of the debate?
No, it's not. It's in fact in the center, in the core center of the debate. I have to say that the rapporteur of the directive from the Greens group, Kufe, I have to say that I support mostly the proposal that is advancing, and especially because of a very holistic approach and taking into account all these dimensions. I would say that the major changes have to do especially with these issues related with health and well-being, but also, as I was saying, a holistic approach, because we have to take into account also what has been said, the social dimensions and all the impacts of having inefficient buildings. And we know that is quite a huge problem that we have, because we know that the buildings are consuming more or less 40% of the energy consumption in Europe, but 75% of the building blocks stock is energy inefficient. So we have a lot of work to do. So the dimensions of health, well-being, the quality of the buildings, taking into account the social impacts and dimensions, especially because there's a deep relation between poor households and the worst performing buildings that we have in Europe. All these dimensions have to be taken into account. But as you said in this introduction to this round, there's a strong need that we have a coherent financing framework and real investment from the member states' side. And it will not be easy to work on that. So we try at the directive work, we try to think from more, I would say, more individual approach, things that can change, but also, and to give support to the individuals and families, but also, of course, these dimensions, structural dimensions are crucial, and the financing, the investment, relate this to the energy poverty and try to fight energy poverty at the same time that we try to improve energy efficiency is a major task. But I think that is a very, very sound proposal and covering the main dimensions.
Yeah, indeed. Actually, you mentioned the fact of having a holistic approach and also of the responsibility of member states, not only for this directive, but also for the energy efficiency directive. And I remember the last time I was in Portugal talking about these issues, I was very surprised to find that some of the legislation in Portugal are also not very positive towards energy efficiency because they exclude historic buildings. And in such a wonderful place like Portugal, there are very many historic buildings. Whereas, for example, in Germany, they were asking to exclude social housing from obligations from the EED. So I think that, and this has a major impact also on the way in which more vulnerable households can see the obligation of authorities to act towards improving the situation. So I think that there is indeed some convincing to be done, and if you manage to make from the Parliament a good proposal, and as I'm sure it will be done, notably on maps and on minimum energy standards, but not only, it will be, of course, easier also to overcome this kind of hesitation from member states. Julie, can you tell us something about your Healthy Homes Barometer that has been developed by Velux, because this seems to me also something useful to collect data.
Yes, so what we've been doing in Velux for the past 7 years is to do an annual Healthy Homes Barometer, where we work with external research partners to basically gather data on this sort of impact on health and well-being of buildings. And what we found in this year's research paper, which was done with RAND Europe, was that 1 in 3 Europeans basically lives in a circumstance where they're affected by excess cold, noise, damp, or mold, or daylight. So 1 in 3, that's 163 million European citizens. And we also found that about 15% of all Europeans currently, or at the time when the data was gathered, lived in deprived housing circumstances. And that's, of course, with the situation we're in today, something that is likely to go up significantly. And the other thing we found, because, certainly some member states, my own included, I'm from Denmark, say, oh, well, but here with us, things are fine. And that is just not supported by the data we found. We found that actually the numbers are pretty even across the member states. So the number of people who are affected is comparable across the member states. And then, of course, we spent some data sometimes while looking at what is it then that these indoor climate hazards can be, that you can be affected by. And that's a variety of diseases, but also sort of respiratory diseases and asthma. Then what we also looked at was sort of the perceived impact on life. So do people themselves feel that they have a lesser life because they're impacted by these conditions? And we find here that people living with these sort of 4 climate hazards I mentioned themselves perceive themselves to be 4 times more in poor health than others. So, you could associate directly with the health, and then you can do some indirect associations with the perceived impact. But what we found overall, and I think these are pretty shocking figures, is that 1 in 3 of Europeans do not have an ideal home environment. And we also found that about 50% of the Europeans do not have the money that they would need to renovate their places to get them up to a standard where it would be sufficient. So I think that also goes to the point mentioned by Mrs. Matisse in terms of the funding here, right? This morning in the opening sessions, when you go in, she talked about sort of energy efficiency and energy efficiency action as sort of like a social policy as well. And I think that's very true, right? Because there are lots of people out there in suboptimal, to say the least, conditions, who, through no fault of their own, are in a situation where they live in deprived circumstances. And so by investing in energy efficiency and doing that with a focus on the actual residents, you're also helping those people out of their situation.
Yeah, above all considering, thank you, Julie, above all considering how much public resources are going into helping paying the bill, and with money which is just given without any kind of future dimension, let's say. Ruth, I remember that when this new European Bauhaus idea came out, first of all, I was absolutely thrilled, but I would like, because I think it's really fantastic to connect something so apparently dry, like house renovation and all the works that you have to do, et cetera, to beauty, to art, to the fact of making our homes not only more healthy, but also more beautiful, since most of the beauty of Europe is actually given by the quality and the architecture quality of the buildings and of the houses and of the cities. So I would like to know, how is it working? Because there were a lot of skepticism, if I remember well, around this initiative. A lot of people thought, well, but this is only blah, blah, it will not work, etc. So maybe tell us, is it working to connect the beauty and the art and the Bauhaus ambition to the hardcore of building renovation?
Well, I mean, first of all, I would slightly disagree that the beauty is, first of all, our buildings. I think our nature, and especially the mountains in Europe, is for sure also very beautiful. I had to say
I come from Italy, don't forget.
And I just also want to add that obviously from our side, we also very much hope that the EPPD will be concluded very soon, and that we will have good report from the European Parliament that will at least support our proposal that we put on the table. That said, coming back to the European Bauhaus, yes, it is working. It is indeed not a usual initiative from the European Commission. So we cannot tell you now, look, this is our regulation and it has been implemented in its member states. But what we do see is that on the one hand, we have a really growing community. I mean, when the president launched the initiative, she said she would like that this is a movement that is growing, and where we just give a bit the first trigger, and this is actually really happening. We have now over 500 organizations that are official partners from the European Bauhaus, from all the member states, but also from other parts in the world. We just had an interesting talk with the Harvard University. They now want to do a special European Bauhaus module next spring, because they just think that this is also a good way of teaching the next generation how architecture, etc., should work. We have more and more member states that are also ready to take the European Bauhaus principles into account when it comes to the investments. So also here, just one concrete example, in the cohesion policy, so where the real big money is, there are now 23 member states who have put the European Bauhaus as one element where they decided they want to spend their money of cohesion policy. So there is, I mean, I could now continue and go on in a lot of different areas of the European Bauhaus, but yes, it is working, it is growing. And what is actually very nice is that we get almost every day a surprise from somewhere in Europe where somebody comes and tells us, hey, this happened in, I don't know, Estonia or in Portugal around the NEP, and we were actually even not aware of it. So it's not something that the Commission is owning, you know, like just us, and we are doing all the activities around it, but it's really a growing movement, and obviously both with our like usual more institutional stakeholders, like also the European Parliament. The MEPs have recently adopted also their report on the European Bauhaus that was very supportive, but also from, you know, less obvious or usual suspects, if I can say so, somewhere in the south of Italy, where suddenly we have a great project that then wins an European Bauhaus prize. So yeah, I think for now we can be very happy about the developments, and obviously we hope that it will continue and that we can really also contribute to the transition that is so much needed, especially also in the built environment and the construction sector.
Thank you very much, Ruth, also for this good news. We need good news that are able to create a sort of snowball effect. Madame Michalkova, tell us, what do you expect as Parliament from the implementation of the Bauhaus initiative? Is it something helping you at the Parliament in the legislation, help to make the building renovation more fashionable or more easy? What is that that you expect from the implementation of the Bauhaus? The connection with the renovation wave?
Thank you. I couldn't say that anything will be easier. It is not easy. No, when we try to change the human's mind and to change the approach. We are looking at the buildings, at the environment in our cities, and into space planning in our cities. What I should say that I was the shadow rapporteur on the report of the European Parliament on the new European Bauhaus, and there was a huge support with a huge interest between the members of the Parliament, and we received a number of amendments which we tried to include in the final version of the report. What we expect now, we expect to achieve this coherent approach, which will bring together the dry, as you said, regulations, together with the cultural approach and cultural dimensions of whole idea of energy efficiency, the new technologies in construction, the approach in regulation on construction products, on which we are going to work in the future weeks, which is related to all the issues we are discussing today. But also we want to include all the cultural institutions and make them familiar with this process of changing the values in the European Union. The green values, the green strategic approach, digital strategic approach, putting together with the natural wish of every one of European citizens to live in better conditions and to live in more beautiful cities and villages, will bring the result we are looking for. So our expectations is to achieve in the end of the mandate of this Parliament, maybe the whole picture completed, to put together energy efficiency, renewable energy sources, renovation wave, new European Bauhaus, new regulation on construction products, and many other legislative items, to put them together and create new vision, new approach, and new philosophy of the everyday life of European citizens, closer to the nature and closer to the goals of green transition.
Monica, you are muted.
Thank you, Ruth. I was going to go on talking. Yes. I just wanted to ask Professor Börstra one of the questions that arrived from Natalie Zaranska, because I think that this is probably you are the most adapted to answer this question, which is where do you see the topic of air quality pushed in the future? On which elements, particulates, filters, monitoring? What is that you are going, which area are you going to calculate, to give data about air quality in houses, in buildings?
Yeah, I saw the question already. I'm not sure that we should, my background is mechanical engineering. I work at the faculty of architecture. So there people are trained to also look at passive solutions. And if you talk about pollutants indoor that come from outside, from traffic, for example, of course, the obvious solution is to make sure that we get rid of a very polluting industry and put them not in the city center anymore, and that we electrify our transport in the cities, etc. So those kind of solutions where you approach things at the source and not solve things by forcing people to put air filtration devices in their bedroom, I think on the long term work much better than the tech solutions, like, for example, filtration devices. Having said this, you still need filtration in certain buildings, like in a hospital. You will always need a good central air filtration system. I think when you talk in general about air quality, one thing I really worry about, especially now with the energy prices, that people will already this winter we'll kind of close off things when it gets really cold outside, not think about ventilation anymore, just thinking about it in terms of energy loss. And we do need, of course, that people need ventilation, especially if you're with a group of people. Think of a classroom or a restaurant, a group of people enjoying the atmosphere together in one space. And if you don't ventilate, you get troubles, for example, with the transmission of infectious diseases. Yeah. And that's something we should keep an eye on. And again, around 1900, when we started making our building decrees, we already had that on our radar. So we should keep it on the radar, and at the same time, think of very clever energy solutions. I mean, they are out there already. For example, where you ventilate and then you have heat recovery systems that take out 80 or 90% of the energy from the return air. So there are solutions where you ventilate quite abundantly and at the same time don't lose so much energy. And so we should keep one eye on the energy challenges and another eye on the health and comfort issues, like I said before.
And tell me, what are some practical, because you were already mentioning some of them, in your research, what are the practical solutions inside our building that could help to improve because of course there are some technological ones, some behavioral ones.
Yeah, I think a really important one, this is already for this winter, I mean, even on the short term, is we are very used to having quite cheap energy. So the general idea with a building in Europe is, if it's cold outside, you use natural gas or whatever, you heat up all the rooms, it doesn't matter whether you are there or not, you heat up all the cubic meters, so also the ones that are 4 meters up high, for example, in a restaurant or so. And of course, from a comfort point of view, you only have to make the people warm, you don't have to make the buildings warm. So there is a development where we use more localized heating sources. Think of like a heated chair, or I've done a project with the Dutch government where we use heated tabletops. So it's integrated in the tabletop. And then with 50, 60, 70 watts, so very little energy. This is all electrical, but at the same time, you use much less energy than you would need if you heat up all the air. You still need some backup system to make sure that in the building itself, it stays 16, 17 degrees. But then there where people sit for a long time, there you deliver the heat and they can actually adjust it themselves. And this is a new way of thinking. I mean, if you people work at home, why heat the whole house? Why not have some kind of device? I mean, they are out there on the market already that you put under your feet, for example. And that actually they with a sensor, so if you walk away, it sees there's nobody there, so it turns off. So these localized solutions, I think, give a good opportunity to improve things on the health and comfort side, but at the same time, create incredible energy savings. So.
Thank you. It is a little bit going back to the solution of our grandmothers, with the water, hot water to hold it.
In a way. I mean,
in a way, yeah. Of course, a little bit more fancy because they would turn off when I go away, but the principle is the same. That's a very interesting hint. Thank you very much. Marisa, I wanted to ask you to dwell on something that you already mentioned. And that is, if from your role as a co-legislator and shadow on EPBD, where do you see the most difficult areas in this, where are you going to fight more? And also, if you can share with us, if you can give us some hints about what you learned as a legislator from COVID-19 pandemic in this respect.
Yes. Okay, for your first question, going a little bit back, I think that the most difficult areas for us to intervene in this area have to do with the fact that we have said, and I think we'll agree that we are talking about an holistic issue. So you not only have to deal with several dimensions of intervention and topics, but also different scales of intervention. And this requires a lot of political will and also availability to invest from different levels of governance. I'm, for instance, when you think about the renovation of the buildings, which is a key issue that we have been talking here, and especially because it's something which we are not so used in the European Union for. We have the lack of places to live, but in any case, renovation is not our core activity. But for instance, just to think about that, we need to articulate measures and proposals that go from, for instance, having one-stop shops to give advice to people in terms of providing information, impartial information, to empower people in order to take action. But at the same time, we need to develop specific and target loans that could help in this renovation wave, let us call, if we'll have it, I hope so. And at the same time, I think we also think that beyond what I already said about the member states investment, you also need to have a kind of a neighborhood approach, because there are a lot of areas where you need to think of it like as a community basis, and we will do nothing on this without gaining the people for this, and without engaging everyone who is interested. And I think that's one of the most difficult tasks, because if we want, for instance, to promote energy communities, or if we want to have the use of renewables at a district base or something like that, these measures, you need to engage communities. I have to say, I didn't say before, I'm a huge fan of the New Bauhaus project. I think this is also a way of involving communities and engaging communities. We will not have any sort of solution to this if we don't somehow can show people and engage people and listen to them, but see that this is a collective gain, that we need all to be engaged. And as for the pandemic, and I'll be short because I already spoke too much, but just to say, I think that people understood even more the great importance of well-being and the quality of the house after the pandemic situation. And also the pandemic has reinforced huge amount of inequality in society. And this is also the domain where inequalities are quite visible. So this need for also to have social equal responses is difficult, but it's something that we already knew, but we reinforced that position from the pandemic crisis.
Yeah, and I must say that the issue of legislation is key in this sense, because if you give the right signals and the right regulation, things are not going to become easier, but at least it's something that is going, at least it indicates a direction. It is about this, Julie, that I would like to ask you, what is that your kind of business need in terms of legislative framework in order to support in going after the potential that we see from years and years, that is huge.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think between them, the other speakers have pretty much said what it is we do. What we need this integrated approach, right? We need to look beyond the different pieces of legislation that together form the picture here. We're also big fans of the Bauhaus, Mrs. Reichstein, because we think that provides the overall frame. But then we also need to get the EPBD, the EED, and the construction products regulation, for instance, to play together and draw in the same direction. That's not quite happening at the moment. Then I think the second thing, and I mentioned it, is just ambition, right? There are those who are saying now we are in an immediate energy crisis. We have to do things short term. This needs to wait. And I would say no, quite the contrary, because what we're doing here with the EPBD, for instance, but also with CPR, is to set up the sustainable energy future for Europe. So for us as a company, it's very important to have the commitment to know where we're going. That's also why we're big fans of the MEPs, because with that, there will be a plan in place for how many buildings need to be renovated at which trigger points, and that will scale up the ambition, and that means it will actually get started. And then I think, as Ms. Matthias said, we know from research, and Commission did some really interesting research on this, that not only is the renovation rate way too low today, most of the renovations actually have nothing to do with energy efficiency as it is today. It's about 0.12% of the buildings are energy efficiency renovated per year. Now, for that to increase, we also know that people have lots of different motivations. We talked about it. Health and well-being is certainly one. Of course, now with the energy crisis, prices is another one. But we also know that the biggest obstacle is exactly what you pointed to, which is that people don't know where to go for information on solutions and on funding. So this notion of the one-stop shop, which can look, many different ways depending on the market, depending on context, but that I think is such an important sort of instrument for us to actually be able to increase the renovation rate significantly. And that's for Mr. and Mrs. Average in the street, but it's also for public buildings, for schools, for all sorts of institutions that need to have like an integrated approach to energy efficiency renovations, and today are struggling to get that information.
Yes. Ruth, I would like, you were already starting to answer this question earlier, but maybe you can go a little bit deeper. If you can give us some example, concrete that you have seen that you found particularly interesting, above all to foster, the energy renovation challenge. Can you give us some examples of initiatives that you find particularly effective under that point of view? And also if you can tell us that the European Bauhaus is having in the member states a positive impact also in helping ambition of the legislation, or is it something that is touching completely different people?
Yeah, well, I would say already it started here in the house, because I mean, Julie, you mentioned now some related pieces of legislation, and obviously the European Bauhaus was also here in the house, then a way of telling the colleagues, working on the different other pieces of legislation, be careful, because we cannot on the one hand have this nice flowery Bauhaus project and that not follow up in the legislation. I'm completely aware that probably some of you might think that then still it was not ambitious enough, but at least it is also for the coherence in the Commission. It is very helpful in a way to have this framing, and so I think that is the first important point. In the member states, as I said a bit earlier already, so there is activity. There is also now more and more interest on the level of the government. It depends obviously from one member state to another. It will not surprise you that, for example, in the Nordic member states that are anyhow already very much advanced when it comes to sustainable building, to circularity, and all these kind of things, that there is that it went much quicker in a way to get also interest for the Bauhaus. In Sweden, for example, the government very quickly decided to give money to 6 cities in the north of Sweden, and they said, okay, here you have the money, transform your city in a European Bauhaus city, which is now ongoing. So this is one of these very concrete things happening. Or another example is Spain, where they were anyhow working on a law on quality architecture. So this whole question, not only go for the cheapest solution, but also for quality solutions. And they were a bit stuck, and then came the NEP, and they could just use this new European Bauhaus as a new push, and finally they were able to adopt the law in Parliament. So this is just 2 examples, but I think that shows you a bit how the net works on the ground. And then obviously we have also our own projects, and they are also funding. I mean, as you know, the European Bauhaus has no own money. For now, we depend on the project that exists already. The Parliament has asked in the long term that we get a more stable financing, which is obviously also our wish. But we will have, for example, in the next Horizon working programs for the next 2 years, so 23, 24, we will have around 100 million euro calls for the European Bauhaus. And this goes then from social housing to building with bio-nature-based materials to, for example, cultural heritage and the European Bauhaus. So, and these projects will obviously then also help to show concretely on the ground what we are doing. Also, just last point, a bit of a publicity, we now have an open call actually under the urban program from our Regio colleagues, so from the cohesion policy, where we are looking also for 10 new demonstrators of the European Bauhaus with an envelope of 50 million. So there is a lot of there is a lot of things ongoing. I will not give you now all the long list, but but it's really good to see that it has impact on different levels, from legislation to what Marisa mentioned earlier, also community building and engaging people in this transformation.
Thank you very, very much, Madame Mikhailova. We often hear that citizens really cannot afford to renovate their houses. There is an issue, and you also mentioned, and Marisa as well, in finding the right incentives to do this. Now, I would like to know from you and from your work also in your own country, which is one that would certainly profit more from a massive renovation of buildings in terms of quality of living and also of energy related questions. What would be helpful to do in your home country in order to go in the right direction in this?
Okay, to mute. Thank you for this question, and thank you for mentioning my country, because in any cases, the Bauhaus initiative can be very national initiative. In different countries, the reading of Bauhaus goals is completely different. We had event with the colleagues from Slovakia and from Danish and Bulgaria, and we discovered that we understand the Bauhaus idea in different way. And this is probably one of the values of Bauhaus, that it puts together the values and expectations of different member states and different nationalities. Of course, it is difficult. In some of the member states, it is very difficult, particularly in my country. But I should say that if we follow the approach we are agreed on, all of us speakers now, that we should look for a coherent approach on all the legislation, and we follow the same goals in different pieces of legislation, we can give the instrument to the governments to propose enough transparent and clear requirements for implementation of Bauhaus or renovation wave, or energy efficiency measures or renewable energy measures in the cities. To create the building passports, this is one of the challenges in some of the member states, especially in the member states like my country. And this is related to the issue of information and data collection, which is extremely important to develop further on the whole building stock. We have to have the data, so we have to create these building passports. But who can change the situation? I think the situation can be changed with one actor, which we didn't mention yet today during our conversation, and these are local authorities, because they're very close to the local communities. If we want to involve the local communities, if we expect local communities to participate, neighborhoods to participate, so we have to involve the local authorities to create their particular vision on particular territory, on particular area in the big city or for a small city. Local authorities can be very helpful. And one other comment somebody mentioned already, I think it was Ruth, and before that you mentioned that we are going to the tradition from our grandmothers. I can say that we have this opportunity now. Talking about cultural heritage, we should not talk only about the buildings in our cities. This is part of the cultural heritage, that's okay. We have a lot of problems, how to create energy efficiency in cultural heritage buildings, how to involve them in the city planning, how to put them in the middle of environment of the city, how to make them center of the meeting of the communities. But also we have cultural heritage in traditions. If we look at the traditions in the construction, for example, in Europe, we can find brilliant examples for energy efficiency, energy efficient materials, and also techniques which are specific for different regions, but which are real heritage from our grandmothers and grandfathers. And we can use them. And this is part of cultural heritage. So I can say local authorities and look at our heritage and use everything we can use from it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I would like to go to the last, very last question to you. Very short. We have asked to all the speakers in this sixth session of this European Energy Efficiency Day, which is going to be the first. So keep your agenda free for the second one in October next year. Just to give a short message about what would you like really people to take from your experience and your intervention in the framework of the Energy Efficiency European Day. So, Professor, since you are the only boy in the game today, you are going first.
I come from a family of only sisters, so I'm used to it. But I think I was just thinking, if you talk especially about residential buildings, then a unique selling point is always if you say not just like, okay, this is good for the climate. Of course, decision makers and also people living in an apartment, for example, of course, they're very sensitive to an argument like your energy bill will go down by a factor of 3, but they are very interested when you tell them after renovation, you will sleep better because your sound insulation to the busy road will be better. You will still have the same amount of daylight. It will be much warmer. You will have much warmer feet in winter because we isolate the ground floor. So if you want to sell energy renovations or maybe energy efficient buildings, talk also in terms of all the health and comfort advantages. And of course, then I assume that the designers that made the plan also were thinking about those aspects. But health and comfort can be a unique selling point for energy measures. That's my message.
Thank you very much. Julie?
Yes, I'll just unmute. So I think the first point is, if people are spending 90% of their time indoors, then we need to put people at the very center of this debate around sort of energy and climate. And then I think the second point that many have made is this sort of like back to the good old days to some extent, right? I mean, we're also a company of more than 80 years. And I mean, what we produce is essentially still the same. It's a window, it's a simple solution, right? Then of course, there are more sort of advanced solutions to it now in terms of like automatic control and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, we have the solutions we need out there. What we need to do is to make sure that we use them and at much larger scale than what we're doing today. So we're not waiting for a wonder. We have ventilation in the shape of windows, say. We just need to make sure we're actually using them correctly.
Thank you. Marisa, last message. Besides the fact that we are going to fight hard on maps.
Exactly. We are all counting on that. I think that one key message is this is not the project of the European Parliament or the project of any organization. This is our common project, our very common task that we have ahead, and then we can build together. And it's not only a very powerful tool for social inclusion and to fight some of the most unequal situations we have, but also I think that we all understand that the union's energy security can only be guaranteed by increasing rates of energy efficiency. And in such crucial moments as those we are living now, I think that we need also collective projects to engage, to get involved, and this is for all of us.
Thank you. Obrigado. Madame Mikhaliova.
Thank you. What I would say on this, we are now almost in the end of the year of youth of Europe. And I should say, we have to hear the young people. We have to see that they change the way of life of the Europeans. They live in different way. They use the new technologies, but they are looking to the environment. They appreciate the environment. They appreciate the freedom. They appreciate the personal opportunity to take a decision. They advise us how to manage in the future. So my conclusion will be, we should look better and hear better what young people tell us and try to follow the way they want to live in the future.
Thank you very much indeed. Ruth.
I will make two
word.
short points. The first one, I mean, we did not mention it in this panel. I'm sure it has been mentioned in other panels. It's this whole question of communication. It's a bit like our only boy already said. People, I think this whole energy efficiency thing is still a kind of technical thing that people have difficulties to relate to. We try to also do our bit with the Bauhaus, but I think, and this is also something that is happening in the Commission, but it's really something where I think we have not found the silver bullet yet, how to actually not only make people understand that it's better for them or for all of us, but also that it's a huge chance and opportunity for investments and jobs and growth. And energy efficiency is still too much sounding like, you know, we have to save or reduce something, and not so much that it's actually a huge opportunity. So this is something that I think we have to work on. And then just to follow up a bit on what Iskra has said on the year of the youth, next year we will have the year of skills, and this is another topic that is really crucial in this field. We hear that so much also from the construction sector, that there is still a huge shortage of skilled workers. And we also with the Bauhaus will try to bring up a new initiative there in the construction field, also, for example, linked to the building with nature-based materials that can also help in this area of energy efficiency, but also energy efficiency, this whole sustainable building and renovating, because yeah, we think that this is another crucial point to make this transition happen.
Thank you very much indeed to all of you. I think that you made really very interesting points. And I think that we can build also on our communication and our work on the different legislative proposals that are coming up. Above all, the EPBD, which seems to me also in Parliament quite divisive, and certainly it will be very important and interesting to bring some of the data even that were shared today, and also some of the consideration also of the good stories that were brought forward today to the consideration of decision makers at all levels. So I would like then, first of all, to thank from my side all those who participated to the European Energy Efficiency Day. As I said, it will not be the last, but I would really like to give the floor to our chairman, Harry Verhaar from Signify, to say the last words of this very long but very exciting day.
Yeah, thank you very much, Monica, and all. So I'm not going to summarize the day, so no worries. Just 2 minutes for a few remarks and for a few thank yous. It was a long day, but I think this was a day also of energy well spent. It was engaging, inspiring. I think also this panel had the cherry on the cake. And the day started, I think, with the most important remark from Vice President Timmermans, who said that we're not going to, also referring to the various crises, he mentioned that we're not going to get anything done without seriously saving energy. And that actually that structurally saving energy has never been more worthwhile than it is today. Also, we have many regulatory elements that are nearing completion, at least in their development, then deployment is even more important after that. But also it was mentioned, and also I think by many of you in the spirit of the day, that these crises that are on us, they've really changed awareness on the crucial relevance of accelerating the energy transition. And in that we need to stick together. We see many elements that are potentially affecting cohesion, And that is certainly something that we should keep. And also think the human aspects of improving energy efficiency will hopefully then also help build the trust that you need for that cohesion. I personally feel that the best way to serve any self-interest is to invest in our common interest, and just think about it. I think, I deeply believe in that. We also saw throughout the day that energy efficiency does not stand on its own. So also there, then it's about sticking together. Energy efficiency and renewable energy, they actually go hand in hand. You could say they should date together more often, because the more you do in efficiency, the bigger impact do the renewables have. Then the energy water nexus also becoming more, let's say, on the radar screen. Also, good news is that many active energy efficiency measures, particularly on appliances and lighting and building management systems, are becoming digital. So that also allows then creation of those bigger projects that are more easily financed. And also the good news there was that there is funding already for 2 years, and there's also a lot of financing interest. So there's nothing better almost to invest in as energy efficiency, because you get your money back, and then after that you benefit without having to invest every year in wasting energy. But I think that it's also important that we unlock that potential. And just to give you one example, also a little bit data-driven, I like facts and figures. I think we know that the lighting sector is seen as one of the front runners, and we're grateful for that, and also for everybody working on that. But I shared also a few weeks ago at Climate Week New York City with Vice President Timmermans that still, and I wonder if you know, that still half, he was surprised that still half of the residential light points are what we call conventional lighting, so incandescent, halogen, and compact fluorescent. 2/3 of professional lighting, so public offices, schools, street lighting, industry, retail, are still conventional. And if we would switch that in the whole of Europe to LED lighting, we would save the equivalence of in electricity that could power 47 million heat pumps. If Germany would switch only their street lighting, they would free up electricity that powers 500,000 heat pumps, which is the annual target. If Italy would do the same, then they could reduce Russian gas imports for electricity generation by half. And I think also when you look at the examples that you gave and that Judy gave on double glazing, on insulation, maybe it's also a way that we convert that in those facts and figures, because then suddenly people start seeing like, hey, if I do this, then I can also do that. And in that sense, you could say that energy efficiency is also a lottery ticket for Europe, and we only need to cash in on those lottery tickets. So that, I wanted just to add that to give a bit of flavor in facts and figures. But then on behalf of the European Alliance to Save Energy, I would like to thank all the speakers. It was really a great day. I would also particularly like to thank the Secretariat, because they moved mountains to make this day happen. So it was quite a big task. And I think also this shows that this was really a good initiative to do this for the first time. So we'll be back, but hopefully also seeing you a lot throughout the year. And so let's stay in touch. Remain to keep a look on what the European Alliance of Save Energy does throughout the year. And let's all look forward to the second European Energy Efficiency Day. So big thank you to all of you, and end of a very good day. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ciao, ciao.